For thousands of years, we have looked up at the cross and seen a victor. We see miracles that shook the universe, the dead rising, the raging waves falling silent, and bread multiplying for tens of thousands. But have you ever paused, in the absolute silence of the blackest night, and wondered about those drops of blood sweat in the Garden of Gethsemane? Jesus did not come to this world merely to deliver sermons. He came to put on your fear. He did not stand on high to observe your storm from a safe distance. He stepped into the eye of the hurricane, allowing the heart of the Creator to race with anxiety and the hands that formed the galaxies to tremble with pain. This is a journey deep into the 10 levels of hellish fear that the Lord endured, not to fail, but to say to you, I understand, for I have been there. Chapter 1. The fear of loneliness. When the universe holds only one, the first fear Jesus faced was not death, but absolute solitude. Imagine carrying the destiny of all humanity on your shoulders. Yet your closest friends fall asleep when you need them most. In the flickering shadows of Gethsemane, Jesus faced more than a death sentence. He faced a terrifying silence from those he loved. He called to them, "Stay awake with me," but was met only with the rhythmic snoring of indifference. This is an existential fear, the terror that in your darkest hour, you must fight alone. The Lord tasted the sensation of a soul in isolation. He understands the single mother staying up all night with a sick child and no one to ask if she is okay. He understands the young person standing in a crowd but feeling like a wandering planet lost in space. Jesus feared loneliness so that he could become the eternal presence by your side. His compassion is found here. He did not scold the disciples for falling asleep. He gently accepted that the flesh is weak. Chapter 2. The fear of betrayal. The stab from the holy table betrayal does not hurt because of the act itself. It hurts because of the actor. Jesus knew beforehand who would sell him out, but that foreknowledge did not lessen the sting in his human heart. When Judas approached with a kiss, a symbol of love and respect, the Lord felt the shudder of a shattered heart. Have you ever been afraid to trust someone ever again? Jesus experienced that fear at its highest level. He tasted the bitterness of a lie directly on his lips. But look at how he responded. He still called Judas, friend. That is the pinnacle of altruism. He allowed the fear of betrayal to consume him so that he could heal those currently carrying scars from deception. He proved that God's love is greater than any human treachery. He accepted being betrayed so you would know that even if the whole world deceives you, there is one who remains faithful to the very last breath. Chapter 3. The fear of shame. The cloak of humiliation. We often fear the contempt of others. We fear our flaws being exposed. Jesus, the Lord of glory, had to wear the fear of ultimate humiliation. He was stripped bare, spat upon, and crowned with thorns of mockery. This fear strikes at the very core of human self-esteem. Imagine the most holy one being labeled a blasphemer, treated worse than a common thief. Jesus felt the tremors of fear as he stood before a crowd screaming for his crucifixion. He felt the coldness of disdain. Why did he accept this? So that when you feel humiliated by failure, when you feel small and despised, you can look up at him. He took his own shame and traded it for your glory. His compassion transformed mockery into prayer. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Chapter 4. The fear of physical agony. The scream of the biological soul. The struggle. We often sanitize the cross, turning it into smooth jewelry. But for Jesus, the fear was visceral, the rebellion of the central nervous system against its own destruction. He created the very nerves that were now beginning to fire signals of catastrophic alarm. He understood that within hours, his body would be a map of trauma. The depth. This chapter explores the hematidrosis, sweating blood, not just as a miracle, but as a medical reality of a man pushed beyond the limits of human stress. He feared the cold steel, the jagged glass in the Roman whips, and the slow suffocation of the lungs. He didn't just fear pain in the abstract, he feared the loss of breath, the cramping of muscles, and the exposure of his internal organs to the desert wind. The compassion. By embracing this biological terror, Jesus sanctified the pain of every person in a cancer ward, every victim of violence, and every body breaking down under the weight of age. He says, I have felt the limits of human endurance, so you never have to suffer alone in your flesh. Chapter 5. The fear of failure. the architect amidst the ruins. The struggle. This is the professional fear of the soul. Jesus had invested 3 years into 12 flawed men and a rebellious nation. As the darkness closed in, the human side of Jesus faced the haunting question: was it enough? Will the seeds of the gospel be choked by the weeds of religion and politics? The death. Imagine an artist watching their masterpiece being shredded, or a father watching his children walk into a fire. Jesus feared the hardness of heart that could render his sacrifice a forgotten footnote in history. He felt the weight of every person who would hear his name and still turn away. The compassion. He endured the fear of a failed mission to comfort everyone who feels their life's work has been in vain. He validates the struggle of the exhausted parent, the ignored teacher, and the visionary who dies in poverty. He proves that God's success often looks like failure to the world. Chapter 6. The fear of being misunderstood, the prison of false identities. This chapter explores the agonizing psychological asphyxiation of being the truth in a world of mirrors. Jesus stood before Caiaphas and Pilate, not just as a prisoner of Rome, but as a prisoner of human perception. Exploring the frustration when the word of God speaks, but human ears hear only blasphemy. We delve into the trials as a clash of dimensions, the kingdom of light versus the kingdom of earthly power. Imagine the visceral reaction of a perfectly pure being called a prince of demons. This section describes the weight of the crowd's mockery as a physical pressure, a spiritual smog that tries to dim his inner radiance. We connect his silence before his accusers to every victim of slander, every person whose character has been assassinated, and every soul whose truth has been stolen by liars. Silence wasn't a lack of defense, it was the ultimate defense. He accepted being the misunderstood so that your true name would be written in the book of life, where no lie can ever touch it. Chapter 7. The fear of spiritual void, the eclipse of the divine heart. In this chapter, we enter the dark night of the soul at a cosmic level. This is the fear of the great absence, the moment the felt presence of the Father began to recede, leaving the human Jesus in a spiritual desert. Describing the transition from the warmth of the Spirit to the cold of the void, we use the metaphor of a diver losing their oxygen line, exploring the hours on the cross where the heavens turned to brass. This is a deep dive into clinical depression, grief, and the numbness that many believers feel. Jesus continuing to obey even when he could no longer feel the love of the Father. This is the ultimate lesson. Faith is not a feeling, it is a choice made in the dark. He walked into the void to plant a flag of hope there. He proves that even when you cannot find God, God has already found you in your darkness. Chapter 8. The fear of death, the threshold of the unknown. This is the biological and spiritual dread of the end. As the author of life, death was an alien concept to Jesus. This chapter explores his confrontation with the King of Terrors as a real, terrifying, and final seeming wall. Detailed descriptions of the body's instinctual fight for one more breath. We explore the strangeness of the creator of cells watching his own cells begin to die. A poetic exploration of what it felt like to step from the land of the living into the Sheol of the dead. This is a journey through the valley of the shadow. Death wasn't just a sleep, it was a battle. We describe the psychological weight of the final heartbeat. He made the bed of death a place where he has already slept. He transformed the end into a threshold, removing the terror from the transition to eternity. Chapter 9. The fear of bearing sin, the purity in the sewer. This is the most nauseating chapter. It describes the supernatural horror of the sinless one becoming a sin bearer. This is the fear of spiritual contamination, the fear of becoming the very thing you hate. A sensory-rich description of the viscosity of sin, the greed of centuries, the lust of empires, the pride of billions, clinging to the soul of the Lamb. Jesus feeling the shame of crimes he never committed as if they were his own. We explore the internal shattering of his holiness under the weight of human depravity. Historical and symbolic connections to the Yom Kippur ritual, showing Jesus as the one driven into the wilderness of God's wrath. Because he took the stain. No one is too dirty for his grace. He swam through the sewer of human history so you could be washed in the river of life. Chapter 10. The fear of abandonment, the rupture of eternity. The narrative core. The climax of the 10 fears. This is the divine divorce. The rupture of the Trinity's communion. The moment the Son was cast out so that we could be brought in. An exhaustive analysis of, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is the sound of a heart breaking across the dimensions of time and space. Describing the feeling of being unparented by the universe. Jesus experiencing the rejection that every human deserves, so that no human has to suffer it. Connecting his internal rupture to the physical tearing of the temple veil. The separation of the Son created the access for the children. The paradox that in being forsaken, he accomplished the union. He accepted the ultimate fear so that the word fear would lose its power over your soul forever. The story of the 10 fears is not a tragedy, it is the ultimate victory of empathy. We conclude with the image of the dawn. The heavy stone is rolled away, not to let Jesus out, but to let us in to see that the bed of death is empty. The fears were real, but they were not final. You are no longer alone in your invisibility, your betrayal, or your pain. You have a high priest who has navigated the map of human suffering and returned with the keys of life. Do not be afraid, for the one who feared for you is now the one who reigns for you. Your dawn has come.